For South African Airways has been published a day after the latest extension expired. Creditors had given business rescue practitioners Matuson and Siviwe Dongwana until Monday to submit the final plan after granting yet another extension following a request by the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa and the South African Cabin Crew Association. The plan, published late yesterday, proposes that government raise more than 10 billion rand before a new airline can be launched. The money will be used to pay creditors who have funded the airline since it went into business rescue in December, as well as employee severance packages. The proposed funding is on top of the 16.4 billion rand government already set aside to repay SAA's guaranteed debt and debt service costs, as well as the cost of supporting the restructured SAA until it becomes profitable. The document will now be reviewed by government and creditors will then vote on it. For more on this document that came out yesterday, we're joined via Skype by a political analyst, Khaya Sithole. Khaya, a very good morning and thanks for joining us. This announcement or release of the document, is it because they were ready or were they under pressure since two deadlines had come and gone already?
Good morning and good morning to the viewers. Look, at the end of the day, this business rescue plan is months overdue. This process should have been finished much earlier at the beginning of the year because there is a reason why a business rescue process has to be done with an element of speed and haste. And in this case, every single deadline had been missed. And I think there wasn't much appetite anywhere for another extension simply because it's not very clear what exactly happens during these extended periods of consultation, because the type of issues and the variables that are supposed to be the input into this business rescue plan are things that existed way back in December, and there are things that may have changed at the beginning of the lockdown but have remained the same. So it hasn't been very clear why they kept asking for these particular extensions. So I think right now they then decided to publish something that can at least be part of the consultation process, and then we'll see how the creditors then vote about it and then decide how to go forward.
Let's just go back to the beginning of the process. By its mere name, you assume that a business rescue process aims to rescue a business as opposed to wind it down. And it's seemingly the case here. How does one link to the other?
Well, at the beginning of a business rescue process, you essentially have possible outcomes, and some of the outcomes may indeed end up saying that this is what a restructured business looks like. But in some other cases, you arrive there and then you discover that there's nothing left to rescue. And then, of course, the winding down becomes the obvious answer. So if you look at SA Express, for example, the answer was that there actually isn't much that can be rescued given just how completely broken the organization had been, which is why the business rescue team then said, we are done with our job, we are handing it over to the liquidators because it is now supposed to be done in a process that actually ends up with the airline ceasing to exist. So that was the SA Express case. The difference between SA Express and SAA is that there simply isn't the same political appetite to let SAA fade away that might perhaps exist in the case of SA Express, primarily because of the sheer scale of the numbers involved. SA Express hires just 691 employees, while SAA directly employs 5,000 employees and its subsidiaries employ another 5,000 people. So you're really talking about a question of 10,000 employees versus 691 employees. So the SAA Express process was far more linear because you sort of looked at what the business was and then you said, look, we can't rescue this. And even if we tried to rescue it, we might end up with a reduced workforce. And that reduced workforce was going to be so small, it probably didn't warrant them saying, let us put it forward. However, in the case of SAA, even a reduced workforce is still quite a sizable employer. So I think this is why there's a much bigger appetite here to make something happen. Now, whether the numbers and the economics back that is something that we have to wait and see.
Khaya, there are many considerations as to why there might be a need or an appetite, as you say, to save the SAA. But one of the big ones was saving jobs. The latest job numbers for the first quarter of the year come out sometime this month, in about a week. What's the recourse for labor at this point?
Well, the difficulty with any business is that all businesses have to run with a set of costs, and labor is a key cost of that particular business. But of course, if that business is not able to generate sufficient income to cover the costs, then there actually isn't much of a business in the first place. The key problem that we have here is that the labor compact, the labor conversation involves so many people, and we all can acknowledge that probably none of these people contributed directly to the collapse of SAA. It had to do more with the politicking and the political interference. So it's always very difficult to really look at it from the prism of the labor matters, because essentially these were people that were doing their jobs, doing the best that they could, while the company was being sabotaged through other means. So you always have to be very empathetic towards them. The problem, of course, is that if that political influence or that political interference has been so pervasive that it has completely broken the business model altogether, then unfortunately labor then becomes the casualties of that bigger fiasco. So the key question here is that if jobs can be saved, what would need to happen to ensure that you don't end up with the institution being broken in one form or another in the future, in the long run, so that you don't end up in the same position? The business rescue plan doesn't really go much into that, mainly because the business rescue plan tries to stay away from the politics as possible. But I think in the absence of dealing with the political question of how we ended up here, you actually will not be able to get much out of SAA going forward if you're not dealing with the big issues, the big elephant in the room, which is the question of how pervasive politics have been and how SAA has been mismanaged over the past 15 years.
We're running this morning with the fact that the public practitioners say that about 10 billion rand more will be needed to effect the final winding down before a new airline can be started. But what were your main takeaways from the report that came out?
I think obviously the most difficult part of it is that this plan has to be voted on by creditors. And now we have a bit of an imbalance in dynamics. There are creditors, which are the big banks, who actually have guaranteed funds. So for them, they will get paid by the state regardless of what this form of a business plan looks like. So they will vote in favor of the plan because it doesn't matter what the numbers are for them. They're going to get every single cent. One then has to feel sorry for the other creditors, the people that don't have that form of security from the state, who are then being asked to take a much smaller fraction of what they are owed. So the numbers here are saying that for every 100 rand that you are owed, you're only going to receive 7.50 rand. And that 7.50 rand is going to be paid out over a 3-year period. So it's a huge loss for people that actually were owed by SAA. And the biggest losers are going to be ComAir, which was owed close to 800 million rand, and SAA Link, which was owed 500 million rand. So they're going to be the biggest losers out of all of this. And they must feel particularly aggrieved about how the process has worked out. But the business rescue team has put the theory that if you do not accept this deal, then you're actually going to get zero anyway, because in a liquidation, then there'll absolutely be nothing for you to receive. So they're really caught in a corner, which means that not only are they going to get outvoted, but when they do actually receive a payment, it's going to be much smaller than what they thought they would receive in the long run.
I suppose now we'll await the process that goes through to Parliament to see what the next step will be. Khaya, thank you so much for talking to us this morning. Khaya Sithole there. And at this point, we say goodbye.